Hey, Diana, did you know that business is an infinite game?
Mark, that's the dumbest thing you've ever said.
Ladies and gentlemen, jurists, and just curious, welcome to the Successful Barrister Podcast. Here you'll learn about marketing, management, and life skills for lawyers that probably won't get you disbarred. Hosted by Marc Whitehead, a seasoned lawyer who remembers when fax machines were cutting edge, and Diana Berry, attorney, COO, and the brains behind the scenes. Together, they are the legal world's most dynamic duo since statutes met regulations. So if you're looking to build a practice, not a prison, you're in the right place. Welcome to the Successful Barrister, where legal legends are made.
And welcome to the Successful Barrister Podcast, the podcast for lawyers about marketing, management, and life skills that probably won't get you disbarred. I'm your host, Marc Whitehead, alongside my host, Diana Berry, my right hand, my COO, and co-host of this podcast. Hey, Diana, what's going on?
Oh, not much, Mark. What's up with you?
Oh, what is up with me? You know what's up with me.
I don't know. Are we going to tell them?
Yes, we're telling.
All right. Well, it's your news.
Well, you get to announce it.
Why would I?
Okay, fine. I am a grandfather.
Officially.
For the very first time, I'm officially a grandfather. My daughter, Emma, and my son-in-law, Henry, gave birth yesterday to Andy. His name, we're going to call him Andy. 7 pounds, 1 ounce.
How's Mama doing?
Mama is doing great.
Good.
Dad's probably about to pass out.
Well,
My wife is exhausted. She went through the birth process with them all night long.
That's
Got
lovely.
To be in the room. I've already gone through this 4 times. I don't need to do it again.
I don't think you wanted to be included in that. Well,
So-
congratulations, Mark.
All right, so we're all stoked. So good. We're going to have a fun day today.
Talking about infinite games.
So we're going to talk about the infinite game, specifically the infinite game of business.
A book by...
Simon Sinek. Now, so we've talked about Simon many times on this podcast. He's
one of my favorites.
One of my favorite authors. What I will say, what I love about Simon is he reads his own Audible books, and he has a very pleasing voice. Of course, he's many TED Talks, so you can look him up on YouTube. Just say Simon Sinek TED Talk, and he's got a lot of great TED Talks out there. He's a very great orator. I would say the criticism for Simon is that he's really sort of a bit fluffy around the edges, and for people who like hard to-do lists and, cutting-edge strategies, he's a little bit more esoteric.
So I'm surprised he's one of your favorites.
Exactly. So that's the sort of the weird thing about it, because normally I would not go for somebody that's a little esoteric, a little bit
More conceptual.
a little conceptual, mindset-y type person. I like nuts and bolts, blocking and tackling. I like strategery, as George W. would say. So
I will say I love Simon Sinek. Just so many of his books are so very good. I didn't finish this book.
This is how many in a row have you now?
No, but I have no problem finishing a Simon Sinek book. This one was, I struggled with the concept. But
Okay.
So explain to me, what is an infinite game, Mark, since I didn't finish the book.
Okay, so the concept of an infinite game is to understand that he basically explores the idea that business, unlike a sport, has no end. Okay, the goal is not to win, but the goal is to continue playing.
So he breaks down games into finite and infinite games, right? So finite games have known players, a defined ending time, a scoreboard, whereas infinite games like business is not. It doesn't have such rules.
Right. Well, one of the things, a finite game, it has fixed rules. Mm-hmm. Okay. There's a beginning and end. You know who the players are. The rules don't change. That is not how business works. Mm-hmm. Business, is an infinite game. You have a landscape that you constantly have players coming and going. You have rules that change constantly. You're always going from one peak to one valley over and over again. So the goal then, and I think this is the mindset, kind of what I call the grinder mindset. The mindset that you have to have is that the goal is not to win. The goal is to keep playing the game. And that's actually under the infinite game scenario, that is the definition of winning, is the ability to keep playing the game.
Yep. And I think that it's easy for people, especially maybe larger corporations, to think about business as more of a finite game. Like, how did my stock price do this quarter? Or did I meet expectations? Did I meet my revenue goals? And so therefore it is very finite. You're going from one quarter, one period, if you will, or one, I don't know, one quarter. Yeah.
Yeah. A quarter, a period. We do monthly profit and loss statements here at the firm, and you've seen this. We've had months where, we lost money. And I know when you first started here, you would look doomy and gloomy when we had a month that we lost money. And you looked at me and you're like, probably surprised that I wasn't upset about it. It was like, well, that happens, we'll get it back next month, or at least we understood, why we lost money in that particular month. I think the best example is, if you're just focused strictly on quarterly profit and loss or annual profit and loss, you lose sight of the bigger picture, which is a lot of times you have to reinvest. Sometimes you have to plan losses. Last 2 years ago, we actually planned, it was a planned thing. We knew we were going to take a loss in terms of our P&L for the year. I'd even warned my bank about it, that we're going to lose money this year, but it's a planned thing because we're reinvesting a lot of money. At the time, we were reinvesting several $1 million of marketing money into the Camp Lejeune litigation, which was something that, for those of you who watched TV or looked at your text 2 years ago, you remember that horde of advertising that went on right then. It was there was a very short window of time to collect those types of cases, and you had to spend some money. So that would be an example of looking at the business as an infinite game. If I would have been looking at it as I've got to turn a profit this year, well, I wouldn't have invested. I wouldn't have reinvested into the business the way I did.
Yep. And I think that the reason why this book was challenging for me was because I expected a more strategic book. I wanted more action items. I wanted a summary, something I could take and implement. Whereas, as you've said a couple of times now, Infinite Game is a mindset. And more so by the time I was done prepping for this particular episode, it's really about building a legacy. So if you're just someone who's really like, okay, I just need to get to the next 2 years, then retire and do what I really want to do, then this book is not for you.
Because now you're playing a finite game because you have an ending. You have an ending in sight.
So I think that to get what you want out of this, or to find the pearls in this book, you have to be at the right place in your life to make sure that this is the right book for you. Right. So I think one of the quotes from the book is, the goal is not to win the game, but to continue playing, to perpetuate the game. If being a lawyer or running your own law firm is just a stopgap to get to a wealth portion of your life, so you can go do what you want to do, be a boat captain in the Caribbean maybe, then this is not the book for you.
Well, and what I would say is that this book is really great for somebody, what I would say in the first half of their practice, however you define that. I've been doing this for 32 years, so I think I'm right at the halfway point. That's supposed to create a chuckle.
I was trying to do some math. I'm a lawyer. Don't make me do math on the fly.
I have repeatedly said that I don't ever plan on retiring. Why would I quit? I'm having too much fun. What else would I do? But which is true. Realistically, I'm 58. I think I have 20 more years minimum in me. So, and more maybe. Who knows?
Good for you. No, well, and then you're definitely playing an infinite game.
I'm still in the infinite game stage.
Yeah.
Still in the infinite game stage. So.
And so today we're going to talk about what, Mark? The 5, practices that that Sinek addresses in the book, or that he kind of creates in the book?
And I have some interesting points and some interesting counterpoints to some of these things. Again, I tell everybody I love reading books. I also love figuring out the things in the books that I disagree with. So if you read a book and you don't find anything in there you disagree with, you probably didn't read the book closely enough, in my opinion.
Yeah.
So always be skeptical. Always be skeptical. So, I just thought about this. In 25 years, my newly born grandson will be about the age of that he should be getting out of law school. So maybe that's what I'll hang on for 25 years and then turn the business over to him.
He is literally a day old, and you got him a lawyer graduating from law school.
No, and I'm gonna turn my practice over to a baby lawyer in 25 years. That's a great plan.
Well, welcome to the world, Andy.
I expect you to still be here,
running things
back by then.
All right, then I'll learn some things about the infinite game too.
All right, with that, we're gonna take a quick break, and we'll be right back.
This podcast is sponsored by Marc Whitehead Associates, a national disability benefits law firm. Marc Whitehead runs a firm of over 60 dedicated people whose mission is to make a difference in the lives of our injured and disabled clients. Marc represents disabled claimants in Social Security disability, private disability insurance, and veterans disability claims in all 50 states. Marc Whitehead is double board certified in both Social Security disability law and personal injury trial law. Marc has litigated disability cases in over 40 states and counting, and can help your clients too. Stop throwing your phone calls away. Call Marc Whitehead at 701-VIP-LEAD. That's 701-VIP-LEAD. Or visit our website at disabilitydenials.com. Referral fees are paid in all jurisdictions where it is permitted. Refer us your disability cases today and know that your clients will be in good hands.
All right, Diana. So let's talk a little bit about this. So strategies for adopting an infinite mindset. So Sinek lays out kind of 5 areas. Some of which I agree with, some of which I maybe not agree with, some of which I at least acknowledge that there's a contrary point of view. So kind of get into that. The first one, which is a theme throughout at least the 3 books that I have read. So Sinek has written Leaders Eat Last. I think his first book was Start With Why. And then, I don't know exactly. I think this is the last book, but I can't remember the exact order.
That sounds about right.
Sounds about right. But he has this theme throughout all 3 of the books, is that, one of the primary motivators, and in his case, one of the 5 concepts in the infinite game is to start with advancing a just cause. Advancing a just cause. What do we mean by that?
So I think what he calls a just cause is what he inspires everyone to keep playing the infinite game. So I was actually listening to Sinek on another podcast about this book. And so some of what he talked about with his 5 strategies. So like he calls the 5 practices and how they become a lifestyle. But he describes a just cause as something that inspires you to keep playing the infinite game. Basically, it's allowing people to be part of something bigger than they are individually. So we talk a lot about purpose here at the firm. And that's obviously our why for the firm. And what is our purpose, Marc?
So our purpose is to improve the lives of our injured and disabled clients.
And so I think that, especially we've talked a lot about this on this podcast, our business lends itself to burnout more so, I think, than even other areas of law, just because our clientele are just going through such a very, very rough time. And so,
and burnout is the enemy of the infinite game.
It is. And so one of the things that we keep, that we start with is, okay, guys, why are we here, right? We may have had a tough day. We may have had a tough couple of days with a tough couple of clients, but also don't forget that you've also had some favorable decisions in there, that we've really made a difference in at least just more, probably more clients than this one client that's really upsetting us. And so that's kind of our just cause. One of the things that I thought was interesting in Sinek's podcast when he was talking on another podcast was that he said, you can have a just cause, you can have multiple just causes. And so, the start with why, he said, was kind of your foundation of a house. Like your why is your purpose. You get one in your life. That is your why. Whereas your just causes are kind of like interior decorating. So, you can change and go from, maybe the wall color is going to be different and that just cause is over here. And then you have a just cause in different types. And so it's more, you can have multiple just causes, but your why is your foundation. And so I liked that he mentioned that. But he also mentioned that, just causes, you can have one for your work, you can have one for your family. And I thought that was very insightful as well.
And your just cause, can go beyond just mere financial gain. One of the things that as lawyers, what we can do is we can advocate for improving the system. That can be part of our just cause. I mean, so, in the disability world, we have advocated for changes in the law to, help our clients in many different ways, some of which, had nothing to do with a financial benefit. One of the things that we've been advocating, our national group, NOSCR, has been advocating for a while within Congress, and God knows where this is going to go with this Congress, but at some point, we have a 2-year waiting period for our clients to get on Medicare after we've won their disability claim. Mm-hmm. Well, that's why. Right. What's the purpose of other than to save money? So the 2-year waiting period. So we've been advocating and trying to lobby Congress to stop what they call stop the wait. Yeah. Why wait? We'll see where that goes. A lot of times it can take decades for these changes to kick in, but these are, part of our just cause is how can we improve the lives of our clients beyond just getting them benefits, which, gets us money. How about we get them some health care? So, and I think a lot of us can look at that. I mean, you can look at in the personal injury world. I think lawyers can take pride in the fact that, through our efforts over the years that products have become safer because of the litigation that was pursued by some very noble, high-minded lawyers, suing dangerous products. We've taken dangerous products off the market. We've had dangerous products redesigned to become safer. There's all sorts of social change in the law that we have made that has gone beyond just enriching ourselves financially.
And I think that's especially true with mass torts.
Yeah, and mass torts. I mean, a lot of products come off the market that wouldn't have otherwise come off the market if some lawyer, hadn't have recognized.
If that system wasn't in place.
Yeah, recognized the pattern of dangerous pattern and done something about it. So, practical tip, I would say regularly involve not only yourself, but your people, in your community outreach programs. We have a community outreach program, not a single, but multiple community outreach programs, touch points that we try to get involved with as a firm. Does a lot of things. It increases morale. It gives us, touch points with the community. Quite frankly, we learn things that we didn't know, that can be helpful in the long run. But, when you're talking about how do you advance a just cause, involve, not just you, involve your staff, involve your people, get involved in your community. I think we need to do more of that at this firm.
That's actually one of our 5-year goals.
It is one of our 5-year goals is to do that. I think sometimes you have to think about it and make a special effort. I do want to point out a contrary view to this. This was interesting. So, I think last week we actually talked about a book by Alan Dibb. So I read a different book by Alan Dibb called Lean Marketing. And he had devoted a whole section on why Simon Sinek was wrong. So I thought I would bring this out. And his point was that profit can be a just cause. And in business, profit creates jobs. It pays taxes. It takes care of customers. It donates to charity. It moves society. It moves the economy forward. And then it provides a slice of that revenue to the owner who's taken the risk and provides a good life for them. And so I harken back. I've mentioned this once before. There was a movie a long time ago. Richard Dreyfuss was in it, and this wasn't the point of the movie, but it was just a little ancillary background piece. But somebody asked Richard in the movie, he was very rich, had a mansion and whatever, and like, how did you get so rich? He goes, I make coat hangers. And it's like, where is the just cause in a company, a multi-million-dollar company that makes coat hangers? It's hard finding that, But he goes, the point of what he was saying was, you don't have to do something grandiose. You just have to figure out a need and fulfill that need and make some money doing it. So he just made coat hangers for a living. I think the joke behind it was he somehow got an exclusive contract in China and sold billions of coat hangers to China, and that's where he made all the money. What I would say to that, I would say they're both right.
Yeah, but I don't think that Sinek says that profit isn't a just cause. I think it's just part of it.
What I would say is that as lawyers, we are very lucky in the fact that it is very easy in what we do to find a just cause. I mean, we've just laid out what our just cause is, improving the lives of our disabled and injured clients. In whatever area of law you're in, you probably can easily figure out a just cause because we help people. We solve people's problems. That's what lawyers do. So it's very easy for us to come up with a just cause, as opposed to the guy making coat hangers, who might have a little harder time thinking about a just cause beyond just simple profit.
So Sinek actually talked about that in the podcast that I listened to prepare for this episode. And Sinek says that he had a manufacturing client, and the manufacturing client's just cause actually was about his people. It had to make sure that they had the means to do whatever they needed to do to live the most fulfilling life. I mean, it made me really think of, the Ted Lasso quote. We're not here it's not Ted Lasso goes, we're not here to win. We're here to, make these fellas better than they, on and off the field. Actually, it's not the field. It's a pitch. It's a pitch. But I think that that's the just cause. You can find a just cause anywhere. It's not in what you do. We just happen to be really lucky, as you said.
And I think that's really what Dib said. He goes, the just cause can be, about your people. It can be about, fulfilling value to your customers, because we all need coat hangers.
We do.
We need them. Otherwise my clothes would be very wrinkly. So I think the point, it was interesting because I was reading both of these books at nearly the same time, that it just struck me that we are very lucky as a profession.
Yes.
In the fact that we get to come to work every day and we get to help people. And if if you're ever suffering from burnout, go back to that thought.
Absolutely.
Is we get to help people and be proud of that fact.
So what's the second practice that Sinek says helps you build an infinite mindset?
Build trusting teams. So he's talking about cultivating firm culture through trust, cooperation, innovation. For law firms, that can, mean collaborative strategies. We here work as a team. Nobody here, if you're represented by Marc Whitehead Associates, you don't have one person on your team. You have multiple people that are working on different facets of your case. And, one of our core values is teamwork. And, the whole concept behind it is 1 + 1 = 3. We can do more as a team than we could do individually.
A trusting team.
A trusting team.
Yeah. One of the things Sinek said was that the whole customer service experience is a result of a trusting team, which was kind of an aha moment for me. The result is, how good is your customer service? You're only going to get great customer service if you have a team that trusts each other. And so I think that one of the things that he said was that it's not, the question we like to ask is, how do I get the most out of my people? But Sinek says that that's not the right question. The correct question is, how do I create an environment in which my people can work at their natural best? And really, trust is king.
Which is interesting. I'm going to jump your quote here. Trust is the foundation on which the law stands. Again, that goes back to our profession. We're very lucky to be in a profession that pretty much demands trust from the get-go. This is when, back in law school, you had to take, what's the ethics exam we have? We'll have to take the MPRE or something. This is a long time ago. I've long since forgotten. But, the whole concept of ethics in the legal profession all revolves around the concept of trust. We was looking at yesterday, so many businesses out there have gotten out and don't do business in Russia anymore because their legal system, it has a total absence of trust. It has an absence of any sort of rule of law. And so businesses have, obviously under Putin's regime, have fled from Russia because they just can't do business. It doesn't matter. They sign a contract. The contract's no good because nobody trusts anybody. The law won't enforce anything. It's all about payola over there. We're just really fortunate to live in a country, that revolves around the rule of law, which basically means that we have to trust each other.
Well, I think that there's that particular element of trust, but what I think Sinek really
trust the system if you need to.
Yep, I think that what he's really talking about is he's continuing on that, do I trust you in the foxhole element of that? And so you can be trustworthy to your client because obviously you have an ethical and a licensure obligation to do so, but you may not be a trustworthy teammate. And I think that the whole point is to play the infinite game. If you are really trying to create this law firm that your grandson is going to inherit, you have got to build, it is incumbent upon you to have teams that trust each other. And I think that goes hand in hand kind of with the next element of study your worthy rivals. But I think it is incumbent upon you to make sure that your teams kind of have each other's back. And I think that we are very lucky in that we've hired well and done, created a culture where it's like we're not fearful of, hey, you know what, man, I need help. I kind of messed up my deadlines, and we don't try to hide. It's hard with all the technology we have to hide missed things, but at the same time, I think that there's still a culture of, hey, I need help, and you can get out, you can get and help it, get that.
So when you're playing the infinite game, if you have to have people that you trust. And if you have people on your team that you don't trust, and your goal is to play the infinite game, you basically have to get those people off your team. I mean, I don't know any other way you can state it, but if you're doing short-term deals, you can kind of hold your nose sometimes, and deal with people that you're not really that fond of or don't really trust. But if it's a long-term commitment, and that's kind of what we're preaching here, like this is a long-term game, trust is the number one element that you need.
You will not be able to create that legacy, which is ultimately what this book is about, without teams that trust each other. And so you have to create transparency. Really, we talk about our core values a lot. Accountability is, inherent in all of those. And I think that helps you sit down and talk to all of our new employees about your core values or the firm's core values and why they are important to you. And I think it's important that they hear that from you as the named managing partner. Still, regardless of how busy you are, that's that important to you.
All right, so we went through advanced just cause and building trusting teams. What's our third element here?
So to have to play the infinite game, he says that you have to study your worthy rivals, and worthy apparently is very intentional there.
I like this for a lot of reasons. We talked about last week, one of the principles of, effective marketing was study your competition. Okay. Well, that's in a competitive way. He frames it here a little bit different. Your worthy rivals. I've always said, and people from other areas of law have always marveled about how close-knit a community the trial lawyers are, even though we're dog eat dog when it comes to competition, especially if you're in the basic PI world, competing over car wrecks and things like that. Even in the disability world, we can get competitive. But in the end, we know we have the philosophy at the Texas Trial Lawyers Association, at the American Association for Justice, our national group, that a rising tide floats all boats. That in the end, we all have to stick together in this thing, because we're stronger together than if we are all fighting our separate battles. So from a pure us versus them perspective, you want to stick with your worthy rivals. But the other part is you can learn in a cooperative manner from your worthy rivals. We've talked about the concept of masterminds, about getting in a room with other firms, like-minded firms, and learning from each other, freely sharing information with each other.
Best practices,
resources. We talked a couple of podcasts ago about how we got invited to go see John Morgan's firm in Orlando, and we went to go visit there. And Pond Lahaki up in Philadelphia, we sent people up there to visit and learn best practices. We were learning from our quote-unquote worthy rivals. And we share with them too. I mean, any young lawyer out there could be the next, great businessman that comes to try to knock me off my perch. Does that mean I'm not going to help young lawyers when they come to me? No. Any young lawyer that comes to me and wants to sit down and talk and see how we do things, I'm more than happy, to help them, tell them what I know, drop a few nuggets of wisdom. Number one, I enjoy doing it. It's fulfilling. But I think you learn as much as you give.
Oh, absolutely. I think one of the things Sinek says was that worthy rivals are the ones who reveal to us our weaknesses. Yeah. And I love that. Like, that's really cool and it really kind of just keeps.
We all think we're hot shit from time to time, but it's good to learn.
Oh yeah, it's good to be just how much more you can improve. I think it really keeps that hunger alive. I think one of the things that we said, which book was it that said 5 elements of a good team player or something, was just you gotta stay hungry, and learning from other people, worthy rivals, is a good way to stay hungry. One of the things that he said that I thought was curious was that having internal competitors is dangerous, but having internal rivals is totally fine. And I thought that really hit home with your whole, the PI or the, plaintiff's world is just very challenging to make your name in there. And that's the rivals part. I think, especially one of the things that I thought about was, the concept of originations, which every attorney is familiar with. It can be hard, especially if one of your attorneys is playing an infinite game and another one's playing a finite game. It can get very, that's where I think that the second element of building a trusting team, you're not going to get, if originations aren't handled correctly, and if everyone isn't playing the same infinite game, you're not going to have a trusting team, and you're going to kind of have that backstabbing or what is interpreted as backstabbing, I think, between your attorneys. And it can really and mess with your legacy.
But an infinite game, it's like you reap what you sow. So if you want, to have a professional landscape, a professional environment with your worthy rivals, that's productive over the long run, over the next 20, 30 years, you've got to give. You can't just
Absolutely.
take. You got to give. Speaking of which, this is a perfect time to drop a little teaser. Probably in early October, my friend Denise Collins from Atticus and I are discussing coming to Houston and putting on an Atticus workshop. See, nobody in this room even knows about this.
We really didn't.
Oh my God. Somebody just buried their face in their hands when they heard about it because they knew it was going to involve them. But we're going to put on a day-long program to share all of our good Atticus wisdom with our local friends in Houston, or anybody in Texas, or anybody who wants to fly into Houston for that matter. So I will tell you more about that later when we work out the details. I don't even know the name of the program yet.
Oh, it's a whole new program. Okay.
It's a whole new program. It's not a double your revenue. It's a wholly new program. They've done it once up in New England, and now they want to bring it to Texas.
Love it. Awesome.
They've asked me to help facilitate it with Denise.
Very cool. So more about the infinite game. What's the fourth kind of strategy or practice to having an infinite game mindset?
You're going to have to help me with this one because I struggled, but prepare for existential flexibility. Mm-hmm. You're the flexible one in this group.
I don't know that. I don't know about that.
That was a joke. That was a physical comment, and that God knows that I'm stiff as a board. But
okay, I was like, where are we going with this? And will we have to edit this out?
Remember the whole podcast you talked about
Oh, my stretching goal.
Your stretching goals.
Yeah, that's not going so well, guys. No. Let's go. We'll move on. Let's move on to. So Sinek says that what he means by this is the willingness to make a profound shift in strategy, 180 degrees if necessary, because you found a better way to advance the cause, which I thought was just really kind of apropos for what kind of is happening with Social Security right now. I think he says that you have to, even if nothing else, if you never do anything with this existential flexibility, you must be prepared to make the change. And I think that's really continuing with the mindset. The idea behind the whole book is just making sure you have that flexibility.
If you're playing the infinite game, the way you do things is going to change from month to month, from year to year, from decade to decade. How we run our law practice today looks nothing like I did 30 years ago. Like literally, they would be like, just a total different planet. If you went back 30 years ago and looked at how we actually did things, how things were actually accomplished. And I would say that we've improved for the better. And I could not have told you 30 years ago. I would look at us today like just, totally befuddled. I wouldn't have any idea what we're doing today. But I've been flexible enough. I've been smart enough to bring in people smarter than me from time to time, whether it's like you or bring in a vendor or a consultant or somebody that has a new idea or a better idea about how things ought to run, about how you actually do the practice of law, what type of law you should even be practicing. We've talked about this in the past.
So I do think that, he does differ, with his whole idea of being existentially flexible. It's not shiny object syndrome that very many visionaries are prone to that. It's really, I thought a lot about where we are, again, current events is, with everything happening with Doge and SSA. We just had a lot of budget cuts with SSA. And so I think that the fact that we had just had this conversation on a podcast probably 3 or 4 episodes ago.
I don't even think it was that long ago. When we were talking about predicting the future, I said the new administration could come in and totally change how business is done in the Social Security Administration, and literally 2 weeks later, boom, Doge hit.
And I think that that's really just evidence of the existential flexibility of the firm and of your mindset. The quote from the book is that the wise adapt themselves to circumstances as water molds itself to the pitcher. And so, yes, we're in a really uncertain time, but I have every certainty that the firm is going to be fine, that, the firm will actually continue to grow just because we've done all the right things before these circumstances hit to be successful in the change. So I think that's what existential flexibility means to me, is just allowing yourself to just know that things are going to be okay because you've done everything right in the past.
Exactly. Number 5 on the list, demonstrate the courage to lead. All right. I think we do that. Well, with trepidation.
I do think that actually he scales these quite beautifully. And after I've done the homework of being prepared for this podcast, because, he says that the courage to lead in the infinite game means embracing uncertainty and resisting the temptation of quick short-term wins. And I think that that's really kind of hand in hand with that existential flexibility, is just, in uncertain times where we are now politically, do you have the courage to lead? And I think courage, he said it actually, courage comes from our teams, just being able to say that, hey, this isn't really just about me. This is about the other 74 people that I employ. And this is, my bigger purpose.
So some of the notes I made from, demonstrating courage to lead is to be able to show commitment in the infinite game through ethical practices and long-term thinking. Even when under pressure, when short-term thinking might provide a more immediate positive result. Again, it kind of goes back to the P&L. Last 2 years ago, we invested for the long term. We didn't worry about what the P&L was going to look like. We didn't worry about what the short-term outcome was going to be. We were investing for the long term. But you can think about those in a lot of ways. Just in a simple way. I've refunded money to clients before. Because the client wasn't happy for whatever reason, or thought that, our percentage was too high. Well, okay, well, what do you think is fair? Okay, and I've given money back to client, even though we clearly earned the money and clearly contractually were, entitled to money. But what's the long term is, in the long term, I'm better off having a happy client,
Yeah. Yeah.
and I'm also better off not having a pissed off client who goes off and gives me a 1-star review. So, you make a lot of those long-term decisions that might not be in your best short-term interest, but you have to play the long, infinite game.
I think that the courage to lead to me was more about being willing to make the unpopular decisions. I think I joke around here a lot that it's a good thing I was never really popular in school, because I'm okay not being liked. And I think that it's never easy to be the one that says, I'm sorry, no, but you can't take that PTO, or no, I'm sorry, you're not, I'm sorry, I have to move you. Oh gosh, I've had to do that one a lot because it's what's best for the team. And it's making those unpopular decisions and knowing it's best for, the next level of the firm or the team as a whole. And there's a lot of, it's not easy.
Yeah. I mean, and leading, you always start with your basic premise. What is our purpose? Which is to improve the lives of our clients. So everything revolves around what's in the best interest of the client. So sometimes as lawyers, what's in their best interest is different from maybe what's in our short-term best interest, and so you always prioritize the client. Okay. Secondly, then I believe you should prioritize your team. I'm not sure what the third thing is. What's the third thing?
Well, we're actually reading 5 Dysfunctions of a Team. And actually, he would say, we actually had this conversation in our level 10 meeting. Your first team is your leadership team, not your team that you manage.
Mm-hmm. So there's a quote here. Did you read the quote already?
Not that one.
Okay. I'll let you read it. You read so much better than I do.
True leadership stems from individuality that is honestly and sometimes imperfectly expressed. Leaders should strive to give a voice to the voiceless and a home to the homeless.
Oh,
that's very Sinek.
That's
oh
very
my gosh,
Simon
that's so
Sinek. That is so Sinek.
It's beautiful, though. I love it.
It is a beautiful. How do we break that down into something that's more practical here? And with that, we're going to take a break, and we're going to come back, and we're going to wrap up about the infinite game. I'm Marc Whitehead, a lawyer, entrepreneur, and business coach. Thanks so much for tuning into the Successful Barrister podcast. We have a blast creating it, and I hope you find it helpful. If our chats have sparked your interest, I'd love to hear from you. Shoot me an email at mark@markwhitehead.com. That's Mark spelled with a C. Enjoying the Successful Barrister newsletter. Even better, let's hop on a call. I'd love to chat about how we can collaborate, share ideas, or just catch up. As we've been talking about the infinite game, I think it's clear the basic concept is think about longevity, not just about the easy wins. To build that ship that will last throughout the whole journey of whatever your career is going to look like,
Yeah, so Sinek actually said in that podcast I listened to, he said, this is what it means to live an infinite life.
So now we're taking it to life.
It means to live a life of service that we literally live on beyond our years on this planet.
So build your legacy.
Build your legacy, which I think is really cool. So we've talked about how business is an infinite game, but I think that you really could apply it to your life.
Yes.
Yeah?
So, in my Great Life exercise, one of the questions the conclusion that you ultimately end with is, what does your lifetime legacy look like? And then you have to actually physically write it down. And I tried to keep mine real simple. I just said, I want to be known, what my legacy is. I want to be known as a great husband, a great father, a great friend, a great lawyer, and a great businessman. Very simple. Mm-hmm. I just kept it extremely simple, but that's the lifetime legacy that I want. So when I'm thinking about my infinite game, that's always sort of my North Star. How do I go through life? How do I go through my career to ultimately get to that end legacy, that which they are going to carve into my tombstone? So all of your decisions, your daily decisions like, when am I going to get out of bed? What am I going to have for breakfast? What am I going to wear to work? How am I going to greet the first person I see when I walk in the door in the morning? All of these little tiny decisions, all the way through your major decisions, you always look at them through the lens of the big picture. What is my lifetime legacy? Well, I need to be, even if I'm in a bad mood, I need to be polite to Cindy, our receptionist, when I walk in the morning,
Or even to your COO.
Let's don't take this to the extreme.
We don't need to take this too far. So I think actually it's funny that you mentioned the tombstone thing. One of the things Sinek says is that, it's about the dash. So on your tombstone, when they write your birth date and the date you pass, there's in between those two dates is the dash.
The dash.
And
Working
so
on the dash.
everything is just about the dash. And so, one of the things that, you were talking about is not really thinking about short-term wins. And I know we've talked about that, but, throughout this podcast about it's not about this quarter's P&L. It's about maybe the year's, what you did that whole year.
Mm-hmm. So one of the things, concepts that I liked, which is paraphrasing and quote, infinite-minded leaders understand that best is not a permanent state. That I thought was rather profound in a very simplistic sort of way. Again, it goes back to adaptability and changing and what we would call best practices and innovation. What is best is not going to stay the same in the infinite game. It's going to change. It's going to morph over time. What does a good husband look like? To satisfy my tombstone. What a good husband looked like, 20 years ago when we were having babies is a whole lot different from what it is, 20 years later when we're having grandchildren. Different. My life looks different now than it used to. What would be considered being a great husband is probably different now, or a great father, or now a great grandfather, or any of this. What best looks like changes over time, and you always have to remember that. I just thought that was sort of a profound, yet stupidly simple concept. Well, of course I know this, but it's good to hear it.
And be reminded that, we're just to reevaluate where you are in which decade, and see if it's the assumptions you're playing on still work. So I know we've talked a lot about legacy building. You've shared your legacy, and I think that that's really the book for me was The Infinite Game is what is the legacy? What is the dash?
What is the dash? I like it. Well, as we're wrapping up now about the infinite game, I like the quote. Play the infinite game. It's not about the battle. It's about the war. And you know what I thought when that quote came to my mind? Mm-hmm. Miley Cyrus.
No, we're not doing Miley Cyrus.
Miley Cyrus. It's The Climb.
No, it's not.
Can we put that back in?
We can't do the. No, we've already done it once. So I think that one of my favorite things that Sinek said about this book is that the only true competitor in the infinite game is yourself. I really liked that because, it can vary when you're having personality conflicts or just disagreements. It's you versus this other person, but that's just the battle. The real infinite game is, what kind of leader do I want to be? What kind of professional do I want to be? Am I living to my core values? Who I am, what the dash is going to say.
Yeah. You only judge yourself against your former self.
Yep.
That's your only competition.
Yep. It's a game of constant improvement, says Sinek.
Okay. Well, with that, getting the high sign, it is time to get out of here. Diana is busting at the seams. She wants to go on vacation. She's leaving immediately after this recording.
Bye.
Where are you going?
I'm not telling you where I'm going.
I happen to know she's going on a cruise ship.
Yes, but you don't know which one or any.
She won't tell me which one. With that, I promised her that when she's gone, I'm going to find something to burn down. So,
which is a whole podcast in itself, the whole arsonist concept.
Yeah, the whole arsonist concept. So she's gone, so I'm going to find something to burn down. But with that, we need to thank you for listening to the Successful Barrister podcast, where legal legends are made. I'm Marc.
And I'm Diana.
And together we're the dynamic duo of law. So remember to rate and review us wherever you get your podcast. And if you've enjoyed this, please tell your friends. Let's get our listenership up, and let's get some reviews out there. That would be awesome. And visit us at successfulbarrister.com. And be sure to visit our sponsor, Marc Whitehead Associates, a national disability law firm at disabilitydenials.com. And with that, Diana's on vacation.
Bye.